Welcome to ND and Me, a podcast to share NDers' lived experiences. I'm Richard, an ND coach, mentor, accountability buddy, and business consultant. Hi, Matt.
Hello.
Introduce yourself.
Okay, where should we start? So I'm Matt Gupwell. I'm 48. I'm a neurodiversity coach and trainer and speaker. That's what I do. I talk to businesses. I advise them. I try and demystify this thing called neurodiversity and set them on their way to feeling a bit more inspired and able to have conversations. That's the aim.
Now that was a 42-second introduction and about a tenth of the introduction you gave on our prequel. But that's brilliant. Not to worry. Talk to me about why neurodiversity is such a big thing in your life.
Okay. Let's go for the long version. 2019 in November, I had a wholesale, full, epic nervous breakdown. Everything got too hard, completely suicidal. And for the first time recognized that if I didn't do some serious looking into ADHD and how and if and why it was making everything difficult for me, that things may never improve. So due to incredibly supportive wife, incredibly supportive parents who are long since divorced, but sort of got together, I was able to seek a private diagnosis, which came mid-December eventually, and got the formal clinical diagnosis of ADHD, which is the bit that probably shouldn't have surprised me. And yet, after a 90-minute assessment, to be told you have one of the most severely disabling cases of combined subtype ADHD I've ever known in anyone that's made it to your age in life, and it's a wonder you're alive, was a bit of a shocker. You know, that was oh, okay, thanks for that. Yay, me being alive, I think. But it helped. It got me on some medication just towards the end of February 2020, and then the world went completely belly up. So just at the point that I was getting used to a whole new headspace, a whole new me, a whole new identity, the whole thing, I couldn't do anything. Couldn't do the job I had, couldn't work, went into full ADHD, panic mode / survival mode, completely pivoted the business I had onto an online thing. And through doing that, began to realize that actually I had more to offer and more to say than, and I'm going to use a phrase which will upset any entertainer that ever listens, but more than just being an entertainer. And that I did want to talk about what I was going through and what I'd seen other people go through, particularly my sons. And so a germ of an idea sort of began, which is now where I'm at. But that's only the me part. I have been invested in neurodiversity in one way or another for, well, coming up for 15 years, really. My eldest just turned 18, and when he was 4, he was diagnosed with autism, or Asperger's as it was then. His younger brother followed sort of 15, 16 months later, same diagnosis. They're both subsequently diagnosed ADHD. But when they were diagnosed, my wife and I did, to be fair, we did what we thought every parent did. Now, this is going to sound like a very strange thing to say. We thought every parent on diagnosis hyperfixated on autism. Read everything, learned everything, sort of absorbed all the information they could in order to find out what it meant for their children and to help. Turns out that's not the case. We've since learned that's a bit not normal, maybe not to the level that we did it. Regardless, we did. We spent hours, weeks, months learning everything we could find, because the diagnosis that both received, particularly if they're Asperger's, wasn't exactly joyful. It didn't inspire us with much confidence for their future. It was a lot of won't be able to, can't do, will never do, which frankly I think since I've learned I've got autism with PDA, which is, you know, pathological demand avoidance, I was very much I think you'll find, I'll prove you wrong, and so will they. So we've been invested in it ever since then. And that means that through supporting them, through helping them at school initially, so they were in infant and junior school when they were diagnosed, we became quite knowledgeable fast because we wanted to. We then started to advocate for other people on an informal basis. Oh, my son's got a diagnosis, my daughter's going through assessment, I'm going through assessment. Various friends would contact us on Facebook who we'd not seen in years. Oh, I've got a friend whose son's just been diagnosed. Could you have a chat with them on the phone? Because everything you post online seems to say you know what you're on about. And so we did. Hundreds of hours, many hundreds of hours of talking to people. And then it just snowballed, to use a phrase for my wife and I, for us. The kids were deregistered from school just before they started, or the eldest started secondary school. So when he was just turning 11, his brother was 9, took them out of school formally, home educated for 4.5, nearly 5 years to heal all the damage and trauma that had happened in school, because school just didn't do a good job of supporting them, couldn't help them, despite the best efforts of some incredible teachers. It just wasn't the place for them. And in the same time frame, I'd started to work for myself, and somehow went from being a family entertainer who would entertain anyone and everyone, moved into circus skills teaching as well, which is something I'd always been passionate about. And by accident, I think, never by design, started to realize that probably 80% of my clients that weren't private parties were connected in some way to people who were, quote unquote, a bit different. So lots of schools that work with special needs, lots of groups that had special needs kids. Every Cub group, Scout group, Brownie group came to me typically because we've got someone that we think you might be able to help enjoy the session more than the last person. Okay, where that reputation came from was interesting at that point, but I rolled with it. Spent 14 years doing that and just learned masses and masses about all of these things. Kind of figured out that everything I was saying to people after maybe a year or 2 years of my own knowledge of my sons about, oh, this is what autism means and this is what Asperger's means, was really complete nonsense. And I was just parroting stuff that I'd read that hadn't probably been updated. And unfortunately, that's still something I see happening today in the world. There's just a lack of current information, but that's fine. So started to get more invested in it, never stopped learning, was informally diagnosed with ADHD, what was the time frame, 2019, in around about 2014, 2015, maybe, at a conference when I was trying to learn about my sons. You've probably got ADHD, my friend. Okay, thanks for sharing. Did the online test and went, oh, he's right, you know. Wife kind of went, well, probably Asperger's as well. He's right, you know. That was then a bit more of an impetus, because I then started speaking for free at my son's old school, at other schools, at groups, anything where people wanted someone that, now it's going to sound a strange phrase, someone who didn't look like they had X to go and talk to them, because it resonated with kids particularly. And kind of realized that my kids were going to become adults at some point. At some point, they were going to want to go to work. And having looked back on my own work history before self-employment and into self-employment as well, came to the conclusion very quickly that what I didn't want was then to have it as hard as I had. So my mission became, how do I support them and everyone else that might need support? And how do I help educate other people so that they understand it? And that's what I've done ever since, really.
A really tough 3 years and surrounded by 10 years of 15 years of, yeah. One of my favorite sayings is a calm sea never made a good sailor.
Yes. Yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah, I'm a pretty good sailor.
My sons are. They can, but well, my oldest particularly is a qualified instructor.
Well,
There you go.
I'm not saying I can actually sail, but using the metaphor.
Oh, well, I have to say, oh,
but
that's,
well done to your son who can actually sail.
yeah, funny enough, he can do it in a boat, just not in life. There you go. Between you, you've got the full picture. Yeah, I know. It's good, isn't it?
So there was a couple. There was a couple of bits that I wanted to hark back to. So one of them was the germ of your idea that's turning into Think Neurodiversity and the type of work that you're doing now in the advocacy and support and guidance space. And something that we spoke about previously about, that golden triad of life experience, lived experience, and understanding and knowledge, and how those two kind of play off each other with where you are in your life cycle and your knowledge cycle and your lived experience cycle to be able to do what you do.
Okay. So let's go with the first part. So where am I at the whole consultancy advocacy piece first, because I think it makes more sense. So when I had this idea that this was what I wanted to do, it was mid 2020, and probably in June 2020. Up until that point, I'd turned a traditional entertainment business that I had into a completely digital one because I didn't have a choice, right? I had to teach online. I had to entertain online. Fine, great, happy days, wonderful. But it wasn't making a lot of money. I wasn't exactly paying bills, but I was doing something and it made me feel a bit better. There was a worth thing going on. By sheer chance, on a Facebook conversation, whilst trying to get some more work, I got introduced to somebody who was very involved in the corporate sector, in corporate entertainment. He kind of took me under his wing a bit, mentored me, and said, well, you know, what you've got here, this is great, but you need to stop putting on a costume if you want people to take you seriously, and you need to do the corporate market. Within 6 weeks, I think I'd earned more in 2 months than I'd earned the whole of the year because of the clients I was getting. And suddenly I was global clients, teaching every day. Fantastic. However, it's worth remembering, we're talking September 2020. I'd only really come to the knowledge of ADHD in the December, January space. So I was still very much like most people are at that point, which was ridiculously over enthusiastic and talking about it at any given opportunity. So whilst I was supposed to be teaching one thing, which was people how to juggle, I was using it as an exercise in mindfulness, which it is, but it was also an opportunity to start weaving in ADHD into the conversation and autism into the conversation. Because the question was, how are you so good at this? There's 800 of us in this virtual room and everyone's saying they've learned to juggle and you can't see any of us. I don't understand it. I can hear the balls dropping. I know what's going on. That's ADHD. You know, and so I could use it as a tool. The more I did that, the more the reputation grew doing that, the more I thought, there's something in this. There's definitely something to this. And I think that it's where I want to go. The following April, I had a conversation with a good friend of mine who's an investor and a business mentor. He asked me a really simple question, which was, what are you after? What do you want people to do? And I just said, I want people to think neurodiversity. Yeah, there's your business name. We'll take that. That works. That then set the path. That then lit the touch bay for me to say, I want to do things differently to the way I'm seeing other people doing it, which is, I guess, what everyone says. I want to put my stamp on it. But crucially, what I want my stamp to be is I want to be dead honest with people. I want to give them absolute context and I want to tell the truth. I'm not just going to say things because everyone else says it, because I don't think there's any validity in that. I don't think it helps. And kind of started it. It was okay. Then hit depression again, which is just a part of my life cycle. Went really badly downhill towards the back end of 2020. Well, summer 2021, in fact. To the point where I literally shelved this as an idea by August last year. Literally, I just was too ill to think about it. It was causing me too much stress. Ended up working on a building site just to bring in some money because I couldn't cope with anything else. And then realized I wasn't just depressed, I was actually suicidal again. I was, the last conversation I had before I was let go was somebody supposed to have been a friend saying, look, what's the matter with you? Are you okay? And in all seriousness, I said, I've just been looking at those scaffolds to wonder which one is more effective to throw myself off where no one would notice. And I meant it. I was just gone. I was finished. I was exhausted. I was just flat out. I hadn't had a day off since COVID had struck, and I was exhausted and I couldn't see a way out. So I, in January, left that completely. And then as I was taking this time out to heal and to get better and work on my own mental health, out of the blue, people started contacting me. People had reached out to 12 months before about this idea, who had heard nothing from, saying, sorry, it's taken me a while. We've been looking at you. We're really interested in the fact that you don't say what other people say. Can we have a chat? Ever since then, I haven't stopped. And it's been people coming to me rather than me chasing them. It's enabled me to be very honest about what I do, but it's where this piece that you mentioned, secondly, about this sort of golden triad has come in. One of the biggest messages, probably the loudest message I see at the moment, is this: I've got lived experience. I'm a lived experience consultant. I know everything. I've got lived experience. I was diagnosed a year ago. I've got lived experience. I'm going to tell the world what it's like to have X. Now, forgive me, this is a very PDA brain mindset again, but I keep sitting there going, well, that's nonsense for a start off. Because unless you've spent a long time learning about other people, all you're telling people is your perspective of X. And that's not very rounded. That doesn't help lots of people. How can you help if you've only got your lived experience, which has only come from very recent knowledge and understanding of this condition? And it goes back to what I said a while ago. If you'd have asked me a year into our knowledge of autism to help someone, what we would have told them then is completely different to what we'd say now, because we've learned, we know better. We've got the evidence to, we being my wife and I, who is a professional in this industry as well, right? Fine. So I started to challenge it, because I do online. It's a bit of a, right, come on then. Your lived experience is a piece. Learned, gained knowledge is incredibly important. Now, I am not a clinician. I literally take my hat off and I applaud, and I am grateful for every person that studied at an academic level or a clinical level to be able to do research, create information and papers that feeds into the whole piece of what we know and how our knowledge changes. I think that's just incredibly important, but that isn't me, right? I don't do that. What I do is I take every experience I had in the 15 years nearly since my kids were diagnosed, hyper-focusing, all the adults I work with, all the children I met, everyone I've advocated for, even to this weekend, a friend who I've known since I was at primary school, who I've not spoken to in maybe 10 years, messaged me on Facebook, my son is struggling, he's got X, Y, and Z. I'm thinking of removing him from school and I need someone to help him feel a bit more confident. And you came to mind. Not because I've got the biggest social media presence, not because I'm telling everyone I know everything, because she's seen for a decade that I actually know my stuff. And that's why she wants to talk to me. And I'm humbled by that. But that says what she recognizes is that I've learned my stuff. The phrase, he knows his onions. I'm beginning to realize I know my onions, right? I do understand how things affect other people or enable other people. So there's the learned stuff. And then, just by dint of the fact that I'm 48, I've been around for a while. I often say to sort of my sons, we rock climb as a hobby, my oldest son and I. And so many of his friends who I know at the climbing centre in the past have sat there while I just blurt out history and ADHD. Like, when are you writing a book? Your life is so fantastical. It is so almost unbelievable, yet we know everything is true. When are you writing the book of your experiences? Because like the psychiatrist said, it's a miracle I'm alive. You know, I taught myself out of being mugged 3 times in 5 years, literally taught myself out of being mugged at gunpoint because I was ADHD. And a mugger just can't cope with somebody who sounds like Hugh Grant in Los Angeles, just going at them until the point they just go, "I'll forget this," and walk away. Right? You couldn't write that stuff, but it happened. I can now look at all my experiences and go, oh, actually, what I thought was ADHD was autism. Oh, I didn't realize my dyslexia affected that as well. If I then make a little triangle and I've got that learned experience and I've got my lived experience, which I think of only in terms of what I've looked back on, and then all the knowledge, which is the biggest piece that I've gained from everyone else. You know what? It's quite a lot of useful information that I have at my disposal. In this sort of computer here is a lot of experience and a lot of anecdotal experience that I can share with people that helps them put context on things they maybe experience or may have experienced, that lets them go, oh, I have never seen that in a book. You're not going to.
Right,
there are certain things. Well, maybe. Maybe. I keep saying maybe. One day I will. One day.
You need a ghostwriter.
But do you know what I do? But even they wouldn't write it because they go, "You're making this up." I'm not, honestly.
Well, yeah, it's seriously scary, but kind of awesome to see what we've achieved despite having a label attached to us now. I'm not necessarily a fan of a label. So I posted something yesterday. It was a repost of, I think it was Reframing Autism.
Oh yeah,
talking about the power of labels, because without a label, how are you meant to find a community? And I'm like, well, yeah, but you can identify with a community without having the sticker, the T-shirt, and the pin badge.
Yeah, you see, I think it's interesting, and that comes again back to, I think, being a little bit older, a little bit wiser, a little bit more. You have just lived with, right? You didn't grow up in a world where everything had to be on social media. You didn't grow up in an age where you had to share every micro detail of every event, of every emotion. Neither did I. So you just went about your business, probably finding some things hard, some things not so hard. Getting a diagnosis, then, if it's anything that I mean, makes you go, oh okay.
Kind of makes sense.
Yeah, right, fair enough. Yeah, I got that. Right, that's why this. Great. But it doesn't change who you are or what you've done. And it doesn't necessarily change who you're going to be. It just gives you information. Yet for some people, I do understand that for some people, the label it's really important to them. It's sort of if they have struggled with any sense of identity throughout their life, to suddenly get that label is that one thing that they can maybe say to people, see, I wasn't making it up. I wasn't putting it on. And that's why, and I am going to say this, and I am going to say it, and that's fine. I get that. Shout about that all you want, but it doesn't mean you're an expert. It means you're somebody with, right?
XYZ.
Yeah, right. And I think that's the bit that because of where I am in my life and because of my background and everything else, that's the bit that I get very passionate about. You know, I don't mean to be a disruptor, but people keep calling it me, so I go, all right then. Whatever.
Well, there needs to be a balance between conservatism and novelty, or else we would degrade as a community and a society. So there needs to be people that are challenging the status quo, questioning why we do what we do. one of the hardest things that I'm contemplating, thinking about, looking at is trying to reframe curiosity and questioning. Yeah, but why you're always arguing? Well, just because I'm asking a question and you're perceiving that as being oppositional doesn't mean that I'm trying to be oppositional. It means that I want to know more. And okay, then I can destroy you with facts and logic. But first I need to understand why. And there's so much of a mindset at the moment in others, because obviously I don't do it because I'm perfect. Is being told, why are you questioning that rather than why are you curious about that? But then those same types of people are the same that see excuses rather than reason. It's like, well, I behave this way and that led to these things happening. Now, I'm not excusing the fact that those things happened or that I behaved that way, but you can understand, hopefully, that I did that because of what's going on rather than some malintent.
Yes.
Rather than, oh, you're always finding an excuse. Well, I'm not finding an excuse. It is.
Yeah, no, But and what's interesting is, right? I hear the analogy of this is neurodiversity is like biodiversity. We need all different types of brains to make the world a rich and wonderful place. We do, right? But the difference is the world has developed and our societies have developed to say that's acceptable, that's not. And the minute somebody does go, why? I mean, I'm not saying I want to do this unacceptable thing, but why? People get very upset. People get very, because.
Bigot.
Now, right? The analogy I often use, and my wife would probably agree with this. The analogy I use, because I've always been told I was argumentative, right? I've always, very argumentative. I'm not argumentative. I am just wanting you to explain why. If a 4-year-old goes through that 4-year-old phase where the only word they seem to have at their vocabulary is why, we humour them. It might exhaust us. It might wear you down. But when they just say why to everything, do you know what it does? It makes you think, why? Well, because X. Why? Okay, you don't have the capacity to understand that answer I just give you. Let me rephrase that. Because this, right? The minute we get, I don't know, let's say past 16 years old, and apparently we're a bit more grown up, nobody does that anymore. If you say why, it's stop being so argumentative. I'm not. I just want to know. I'm just asking you a question. And if you can give me the answer to the question, great. If you can't, I'm going to ask you again. Right? I use a phrase all the time when this comes up. I say, I am willing to be proven wrong. But until you prove me wrong, I'm going to assume that I'm right. Now, I don't think that's, wrong. I don't think that's me being obstropolous. I just think that's me saying, this point in time, my reality, my version of truth is X. You're telling me it's not, but without any evidence to the contrary, without anything to back up your opinion other than, well, that's because. Sorry, that doesn't work. Now, that's how I approach my business. Rightly or wrongly, that's how I approach everything. I approach it with the mindset of, tell me why you think that, and let me show you another way to think about it. Let me give you an alternative proposition, an alternative idea, and let's just see where it goes after that. And the greatest example, bizarrely, I can give you of when I first realized that that was a valid way to be is when I started teaching juggling. Right? I taught myself to juggle when I was 16 because I wanted to annoy my brother. Different story. Taught myself to juggle. Had juggled for, I don't know, almost 20 years probably before I became an instructor. Now, when I started teaching circus skills, The model I had for how do you teach someone to juggle 3 balls was from every book and every pamphlet and every other circus instructor I'd worked with, met or seen. And they all used the same metaphors, the same words, the same descriptions in the same order. Now, I distinctly remember in my first probably 6 to 9 months of it being part of my business, I could go to a room with, let's say, 100 people. And using those methods, maybe 10 people would learn to juggle. 90 would walk away nearly, not quite, or having no clue. And it used to really frustrate me. And then I had this experience teaching in a school with a pal. And it was in a secondary school. And there was a kid there who was clearly autistic. I mean, obviously autistic in the class. Great, he was in the session. And they were being taught to juggle with this thing called juggling scarves. So they're like light, floaty pieces of silk rather than a ball, because they're easier. And the principle is they go up, they take longer to come down, easier to do it. Fine. So my friend who was instructing him was, okay, so we're going to just hold the scarf and I want you to throw it in the air, watch it go up, and then catch it in your other hand. And this kid was just having a terrible time. The scarf was going there, it was going there, it was going down. It wasn't at any point going where the instructor thought it should go. And after about a couple of minutes of this, I could see the frustration in this lad's eyes, and he just screwed up this scarf, threw it on the floor and said, "This is stupid." And my friend's response was, well, everyone else has managed to do it, which kind of red rag to bull. And the lad turned around to me and said, "Why do you keep telling me to throw it?" Because that's what you do. He said, "You don't throw it." And what he meant was, when you actually stay there, oh, no, I can't do it. When you use a juggling scarf, try and show you this, you pinch it like that in your fingers. And the action is you pull your hand up and let it go, right? So it's this action. And the lad stared my friend in the face and went, "You don't throw, you pull. If you told me to pull it up, it would have worked." My friend went, "I don't understand." And the kid literally picked up the scarf, went, "Watch, pull, catch, pull, catch." And my friend was just like, "Oh, whatever," and walked off to help somebody else. And I was curious. I walked over to this kid and I went, "Sorry, excuse me. I think you're right, but can I just test the theory here?" "Oh, what?" I said, "Can you do it with 2 scarves?" "No." "Are you sure?" "No." "Okay, well, you try it." I said, "I'm going to tell you what to do and you're going to do it. I want you to pull, and when that one's in front of your face, I want you to pull that one to the same place. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Pull, pull, catch, catch. That's what we're doing." And he literally out loud went, "Pull, pull, catch, catch." And a smile came on his face. "Okay, now we're going to juggle 3. "No, we're not." "Yes, we are." "No, we're not." "Yes, we are." "And this is how you're going to do it." Told him how to hold 2 in one hand, told him how to hold the other one. Said, "So now we go pull, 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 catch, catch, catch. Say it, then do it." Lo and behold, pull, 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 catch, catch, catch. He dances around the room. He goes and tells his learning support advisor, "I can juggle." And my mind was blown, because that's not how you taught juggling with scarves. I get the kid back and I said, "Can I ask you a question?" He said, "Yes." I said, "When I teach juggling, I hold a juggling ball and I tell people that I want them to throw it up in the air." And he said, "That's stupid." "Is it? Why?" He said, "Because you're not throwing it, you're pushing it." "What's that action?" "You push it." "Oh, okay." I said, "Do you mind giving it a go?" "How?" So I taught him how to do it. At the time, can you push and catch and push and catch? And he pushes and he catches. Great. Can you push with a clap and then catch? And he pushes with a clap. 10 minutes later, the kid that couldn't was juggling 3 balls, better than anyone else in that hall. And I walked away going, oh my God, epiphany. Because it's not doing it the same way as everyone else if it doesn't work. I had a massive public event the following weekend, and I taught every single person, child and adult, to juggle with balls in exactly the same way. Didn't say throw again. If anyone said, "Oh, I know what you do, you throw," I said, "No, you don't, you push." completely rewrote in my head the system. And I remember starting to count on that day. It was a Saturday afternoon. I counted in one afternoon that I taught 300 people to juggle. 300 people walked away going, I can now juggle, because I changed one word. Well, if that's not the embodiment of, just because it's what everyone says it should be, doesn't make it right, I don't know what is. And that was sort of my mindset from then on, and it still is now. I will take what you tell me is the way to do it. And if I don't think it works for everyone else, if it doesn't get the right result for everyone, then I will find another way. And I will find another way that works, and I will tell you why it works, because I will show you why it works. Now, if that makes me awkward or obstropolous or whatever, I don't mind. Because if it helps other people, that's what I'm there to do. Does that make sense? It's that.
Yeah. It absolutely does, and highlights further the power of language.
Hugely.
There was a couple of TED talks that I was watching recently about how language is directly linked to how we think. So they were speaking about Aboriginals in Australia and New Zealand, always talking cardinal directions rather than left and right. So they'll say east foot, not left foot, if you stood in the right orientation for that foot to be in the east.
Yeah.
And further and further and other things. And that there is a link there, although I'm not a big fan of it, of that mind over matter stuff. So actually being able to tell yourself what to do or how to be. So my dad's been unwell recently, and I was literally helping him breathe, because he couldn't. He was in such a panic he couldn't think for himself.
Yeah.
And I was like, just breathe in, and then just breathe out slowly. Just breathe normally. It's okay.
Yeah.
And he's just like, just talk to me. Just tell me when to do stuff.
Yeah.
But all of that mindfulness, I've never really gelled with, in the sense of stillness and silence and no. But I sit there and I build and paint things. I have a creative edge, and I can sit for hours without speaking to anyone, hyper focused on stuff.
Are you present in that moment at that time? Is your mind quiet? Does it stop the racing? And do you feel that you are happy?
So I've had a tumultuous life.
Yeah.
And I don't like sitting with myself, because that's not very comfortable. So I'll sit and watch YouTubes on 2x speed whilst doing something, because that stops my brain existing on its own. But that also means that I can absorb information twice as fast as anybody else.
But you see, again, right, so what you're proving is that just because the largest voice, the largest population says X equals Y, doesn't necessarily mean it does for everyone. So going back to lockdown, at the time, I was still a circus skills instructor. When I got into the corporate world, I taught people to juggle. You then get people saying, this is great, this is mindful. I said, well, would you like another session on what active mindfulness is with juggling? Yes, what's this? Because they were doing yoga online and, Wim Hof breathing online, all these wild and wonderful things. I would teach people how to be mindful in literally seconds, with nothing other than their hands and a couple of pairs of socks. And their minds were blown. And I was trying to explain to them, this is what I call active mindfulness, because I'm moving when I do it. Now, mindfulness for me is teaching. Mindfulness for me is speaking. It's doing this. I'm in my happy place. I'm in my calm place. But mindfulness for them, as I would explain, was it's the practice of trying to do something that you're not yet accomplished at with intent, whilst allowing yourself to know that you might not be good at it. Those three elements make you able to relax a bit more and be mindful. And when people got it, I mean, literally, I taught 10,000 people roughly throughout lockdown across the globe. I was doing sessions where I didn't speak because it was in countries where I didn't speak their language and they didn't speak mine. It was all through pantomime, but it worked. They got the idea, and you could get the translator saying, Matt's saying this, do you understand? And the feedback was, oh my, oh wow, I'm keeping these on my desk. I'm never forgetting that. But it wasn't yoga. It wasn't lie down and meditate for an hour.
Yeah.
It was do something. Now, does that make it wrong? No. Does it make it right? For some people, yes. For others, maybe not. The point is, it's having the, again, and I'll go back to this, the life experience to understand that not everyone fits the model that you're trying to tell them they should fit because that's what your experience might be. Well, no. You know, it just doesn't, it doesn't work. But it's fascinating. And you're right, language is the key to everything. Language unlocks understanding in ways that most of us will never realize. I'm fortunate that that experience of teaching people to juggle just gave me the best lesson in how powerful language is. And it changed the way I would approach teaching everything, including what I do now. Because the better my language is, and I don't mean not swearing, but the more useful it is, the more people gain from the sessions and the information I give them. Because I don't want them to feel like I'm baffling them with science or jargon or labels or terms. That's not the point. The point is, I just want them to understand the heart of the issues. And if that's what happens, great. And if it's because I learned to teach people to juggle, happy days. There was a point to it in the end. You know, it's really strange. But
yeah, I was going to say it's not strange. You know, it's finding your ikagi. You know, something that you love doing that is useful to other people and you can make a living from.
Yeah, I know. Well, this is why speaking is the big thing. This is where the aim for me is to get back onto stages, to stand in front of more people. And I love teaching. I love the consulting side, but the speaking bit for me is just it's the gold dust. It's the happy place. It is where I'm the most alive. It's where I'm the most able, and it's where I'm the most effective. And it always has been. It always has been. So the more I am able to do that, I know that the more good I'm able to do, the more I'm able to affect change. And you know, that's all I want to do. After the life I've lived, my God, it's fantastical, and there's probably a book in it, but I wouldn't wish it on anyone else. There's a weird juxtaposition, right? You know, I've survived it to this point. God forbid anyone else has it.
Yeah.
But it's maybe who I am.
Exactly. You know, the hardest thing with my kids, you know, my wife didn't have an easy childhood either.
Yeah.
But you know, we don't want them to go through the trials that we went through. But we are who we are because we went through them. Yes. Okay, now I'm kind of in this catch-22 where, yeah, but why don't you get it? Why can't you understand this stuff? Oh, because you've never had to try to. So what you need to do is get a screwdriver and undo the screw. Yeah, but it keeps slipping out the screw because you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
You know, I was, yeah. Can you be hands-on? Can you go and do this? So, you know, I had my eldest, you know, he's 16 and a half, help me decorate, plaster this room.
Yeah.
And I was like, all I need you to do is hold up this piece of like plasterboard. It's 8 foot by 4 foot.
Yeah.
I'm up on a ladder with the other end. And he's just like on his phone with like a finger on it. I was like, you know, this weighs like 10 kilos.
Yeah.
And you're directly underneath it. So could you at least be a little bit more present, a little bit more aware? And then you realize that you've put them in cotton wool and bubble wrap their whole life, and they don't know risk.
No, and they don't know how, and they don't know what the consequence of not is, or the ability to, or I know it's an interesting sort of thing to be a parent, and and to see that with your kids. But I think you're right. There comes a point, sometimes you get massively frustrated, and there are other times where you just think, I've just got to back off. It's not their fault. It might be partially. It's not their doing. And actually, they've got to find their path. They've got to find their own way, and they've got to figure it out. You know, I mean, it is that thing, isn't it? They've got to understand who they are, what they want to be, and I would never want to feel they were dictated to, or felt they were dictated to. That would break my heart. I don't want them to feel dictated to. I want them to feel like, if they say, Dad, I'm going to be whatever, I say, all right, then go off. As long as you're happy, you can feed yourself and keep a roof over your head, do whatever you want, right? That's what I want, because I know that they've got enough to deal with, being autistic, having ADHD. Right, that's enough for me.
So your to-do list is not die.
Yeah, basically.
Off you go.
As it turns out, so was mine. It's just that nobody told me. You know, I just managed to survive. It's just, I don't know. It's crackers to me. It makes me chuckle every day when I do this. And that's where part imposter syndrome comes in as well. You know, that thing of, do I have any right to be doing this? I mean, really? Have I got any right to having this conversation? Have I got any right to expect anyone to listen to me? And then when people tell me that they want to listen to me, you kind of go, oh, okay.
Shit,
great.
Am I now an expert?
You see, now I'm very funny about that. The one word I will never use, the one word I refuse to use about myself, right, is the E word.
Exceptional.
Never gonna,
extraordinary.
Yeah, I'm that. Yeah, I'm all of them. Yeah, Egypt, but I'm not an expert. I won't. I refuse to allow myself to say I'm the expert, because I think that's so self-inflated. That's so. There are people who I respect so deeply, so incredibly in this world that I find myself in, right? People who have done far more than I could ever dream to do, help more people than I could ever dream to achieve. They are the experts to me. They are the people that have the rights to write the books, to write the papers, to say they know. I am merely a messenger of my experience and my ability to communicate that. Now, I can look at what expert means in the dictionary and it might tell me different. But I won't use that term. If somebody else wants to say that, you go ahead. You can think that of me. You're not getting it from me. Does that make sense? Because I just see too much of it online.
Absolutely. You know, my view on that is that the only person who you're only allowed to be an expert when somebody says you are.
Yes.
It's like, I'm not an expert, but if you've hired me to be an expert, then I'll give you what I've got.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to call myself an expert.
No.
Because, there's another conversation there about comparison. It's like, well,
there is.
There's a hierarchy of everything. You know, there always has been a hierarchy. There always will be hierarchies. And somewhere on the totem pole, I am. Now, you might see the Egypt down the road as not an expert, but I know him personally and would rate him more than I rate myself. Yeah. So on my totem pole, he's higher. So don't call me an expert and not him an expert, because
Yeah.
So,
no, I definitely get that, and for me, it's a very hard thing to accept. Yeah, and this is a weird dichotomy of ADHD and a bit of rejection, sensitive dysphoria, and all the things that go with it, and anxiety, depression. I crave praise. I am desperate for validation. I am desperate for people to say you're good.
But Matt, we tell you that all the time.
Yeah, but I also can't stand it, because then I feel pressure.
Yeah.
Right. My hobby, one of them, but one of my hobbies is I'm sort of involved with the whole Ninja Warrior show. I've been for a number of years. Get to train with some of the guys and girls who are at the top of their game in the sport. And what they have come to see me as, when we do all the PR openings of the Ninja Warrior Adventure Centres, all the everything. They go, if there's a voiceover needed, if there's a piece to camera needed, if there's an interview needed, it's you. You are the go-to, to the point that the new series started to air. I didn't apply to be on it. I wasn't ready for it. I didn't want to be on it. And then I get a message out of the blue, I think the day before the first episode airs, from 3 organizations that we're involved in, saying, we want to launch a podcast in line with the show, and you're hosting it because we know you're the best person to do it and you can interview people. Okay.
Yeah, and how many zeros are after that pound sign?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. As my wife calls it, oh, this is another passion project. Yes, it is. Right. But the flip side to that is, A, they're right. I can set up a podcast. I can set up an interview. I can interview 4 people at once without batting an eyelid because I've got ADHD, and I can jump and I can fix their audience. And then I can pull a few strings. So it goes from, this is a podcast which needs a bit of leverage. How can we do that? I phone my mate and say, hello, Ben, would you be on the podcast with me? Because it was a really good episode. We need you to talk about it. And then you say, yeah, Ben Shepherd's going to be on with us. I'm sorry, you've just got the presenter to be on the podcast. Well, yes, because we're friends, because I met him on the show and he's lovely. So he'll do that. That's when I sit back going, oh, my life's weird. My life's really weird. That shouldn't be normal. In fact, my son said to me last night, and this kind of illustrates it. I don't know what we were talking about, some conversation. Now, my son has got it in his head. Do you remember what the Kevin Bacon theory was? 7 steps of Kevin Bacon, that everyone's seven steps removed from Kevin Bacon. It was a theory that went around years ago.
Okay. Well, right. So I've heard the 6 or 7 steps of anyone, but Kevin Bacon.
So Kevin Bacon. So my son is convinced. He's utterly convinced that works for me. He's utterly convinced. He's like, you just know someone that knows someone who knows you. And this came about because he announced yesterday that he wants to go study sound design and sound engineering at university. And he's looking at a course, and he's going to need to do some industry work experience. Okay, well, I'll just call my mate and I'll get you some work experience on the Gadget Show. I'm sorry, what? Yeah, I'll get you work experience on the Gadget Show in the sound department. And you'll do that how? Because I know the man that owns the production company that puts the Gadget Show together, as well as everything else for Channel 5. So, do you just know everyone? Is this just how this works now? Not that I know everyone, it's just that I'm nice to everyone.
I'm not saying it's cronyism, but it's who you know.
But mate, listen, I've made sure when I've been given the opportunity that I'm nice enough to people that I think at some point that will help. I am fortunate that I've met some people that think I'm nice enough to then want to remain friends after the fact. The fact that some of them are what other people call celebrities is neither here nor there, because to me, they're just people. They're just my friends. They're just people I know. It makes no difference to me. But to my son, it's kind of like, this is just so weird. And he's sort of right. Maybe it's part of being a jester for 14 years. It was a recognizable costume. I have a very recognizable voice, and I'm very aware of that. And everywhere he's ever been with me, literally everywhere, someone has come up out of the blue and gone, oh, it's you. He just looks at me and goes, again, we are miles from home. We are nowhere near home, and you're saying they know you. Yeah. Now, that doesn't make me anything other than I've got around a bit, but I use that in what I do. I use that ability to hopefully make connections very quickly, to gain rapport very quickly, to do all the things that I think make a good speaker and a good educator. I use all of those because I think it's important. You know, I want people to trust me enough that they think, oh, actually, I quite like this guy. I quite like the way he comes across, and I believe him, and I'm willing to listen to him. And I'm lucky that I've got that ability to do that. From my son's point of view, I use it as a lesson to say the only reason I'm able to do this, the only reason I know all of these people is because I've just been nice. Just be pleasant to people, help people, you know, listen to people, take time for people, and it will, and it does always in the end come back. But it does make me giggle. It in this world of social media, in this world of, like I say, everything online, I've been there, done that. I don't need to share all of this. It'll go in the book. How many other people, to give you the most fantastical thing, how many people can say they had their life threatened by Dumbledore? For real.
Well,
Me. Richard Harris, mind you, Dumbledore Part 1. Not Part 2. Dumbledore Part 1.
That's the moment when you like pull your collar up.
Yeah, it really was. It really was. It genuinely threatened me on my life if I didn't guard a gin and tonic, a triple no less, at 7:30 in the morning on a flight to Moscow. There you go. Put that picture together because it makes no sense unless you were there, but it's absolutely true. But it's that kind of thing of, it's something I've always got in the bank that you go, the amount of things that have happened that you think, is that because I'm ADHD and I had no filter, so I didn't realize maybe I shouldn't just treat everyone as if they're a friend and just chat to them? Or is it because I'm that approachable that those people felt that was okay? I don't know how any of this stuff has happened, but the stuff that's gone on is just nuts. But it all feeds into, again, I can look at every scenario I put myself in, every scrape, every close call, every positive, and go, at least now I've got the understanding of that was ADHD, that was autism, there's a bit of dyslexia in that, and that's just because I was a wally. Right? It's sort of, I get it now, and then I'm able to put that in context for other people that go, that's why Dave does that. Yeah, probably. Do you know, it's that kind of a usefulness.
Although maybe you should ask Dave before you make an assumption.
Oh, no. I only do it while they're in the room with me. It's very funny. Whenever I teach, I say this, and I have a disclaimer on my notes when I teach online. I have the same one when I do it in person. Not a doctor, not a clinician, not here to diagnose, not here to assess, not going to give you any information. That is not my remit. I am not here to do that. You get to questions on every session, and there's always a handful of people, and you know exactly what they're saying. So, if someone, for example, did X, Y, and Z, do you think they should get an assessment? And I always dance around it in the most blatant way. I go, well, if someone was very concerned, like I said, here are the routes to go and start the process. Don't ask me to diagnose you. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to get the Aspidar out or the ADHD signal.
I hope that your friend gets the support they need.
Right? It's like, oh my God. But it does highlight something whenever that happens. It highlights how many people live and don't know. That struggle and don't know, that don't understand until they meet someone that says something that makes them go,
oh, hang on.
Right, so maybe, and I always use that word, maybe. There ain't no definites because I can't tell you, but maybe. And that's why I think, interestingly, the whole piece about is self-diagnosis valid at the moment? Yes, of course it is. Because when wait times are anywhere between 2 and 5 years for an NHS diagnosis, when private can cost you upwards of 1,500 quid for anything, yes, saying, I feel like this meets all of my experience to this point. I feel like I resonate with this, and I've tried some of the things that apparently help people who are diagnosed, and they're helping me. So I'm going to go with it. I'm going to run with this. Yes, and absolutely yes. Therefore, every employer worth their salt should say, okay, if that's how you identify and you're asking for help, as long as we can, we'll give you that support.
That goes back to the conversation earlier about finding that voice in that community to go, well, actually, I don't need the pin badge from the NHS because, I've lived with this for X years.
Yeah.
And, you're telling me that these behaviors and this way of thinking and being aligns to these types of things. And that isn't getting all, what is the correct word? I can't remember. But this isn't you being Dr. Google and going, oh, I'm dying of everything because WebMD said so. No,
No.
yeah, this is taking time to build that acquired knowledge to say, well, actually, I thought it might be the case. I've done some reading and it seems like it is.
Yeah.
Well, let's go see the doctor and get on the waiting list.
Yeah.
I've had 2 or 3 people on that have managed to go through the NHS route relatively quickly.
Yeah.
And spoken to a few now that are on a list because stuff takes time.
Yeah.
And, if you're able to be empowered to go and ask for accommodations and support, then good for you.
Yeah.
And a lot of those accommodations are good for neurotypical people too.
Yeah, well, that isn't that always the way. Yeah, right. That's the golden nugget that I think every advocate worth their salt should be saying to people is, don't get hung up on this is only going to help Jenny, because it might help the rest of the office as well.
Yeah.
It might just make the office a nicer place to be. Have you ever considered that? That's really important, because actually then what it does is it stops it being an isolated, oh, we're only doing this for you, and it's just that we're making a better environment. Isn't that nice? Aren't we wonderful? Kind of a scenario. And to go back to your point about feeling empowered to put yourself on a waiting list, there's a friend of mine's oldest son's teenager who I've known now since she was 13, I think, just turned 17. And she spoke to me for 3 or 4 years about, I think I'm autistic, I think I've got ADHD, I think I suffer with anxiety, and I've had many conversations with her. And then a week ago, I'm getting a Instagram, because she's a teenager, conversation for about 2 hours, and Mom said I can choose between going to a doctor or speaking to a counsellor at college, because I'm struggling and I need some help, but I'm concerned that they're just going to say it's anxiety and tell me to go and do mindfulness again. I give her lots of nice advice, tell her some things that she might want to say when she has the meeting, and lo and behold, Monday morning I get a message saying, I stood my ground. I told them that it isn't just anxiety, that I identify as autistic, that I don't see a reason for me to be on a waiting list, because it's not like I can take a pill for it. It's not like I can get a treatment for it. I know what it means. I want you to understand that. Blow me down if the college didn't say, okay, we're going to pause this meeting and we're going to get an autism specialist to come and speak to you because we think you're right. If that is what it took to help that young lady get through her college years, get through her A-levels, get onto whatever her next step is, and I'm able to do that without fanfares, without banging it all over social media and saying I'm wonderful, if that's what I'm able to do, do you know what? That makes me feel like the proudest person on the planet, because that's what people need. They need people to talk to that they trust, that they understand, know what's going on, that have the knowledge to help, and therefore they can go and get that help. Great. That, to me, comes back to the triad. Because to give her the information I gave her, to know exactly what she needed to say, because I knew what the college professionals were going to say, I needed to have experienced college counsellors. I needed to have experienced other teenagers and to have lived it myself, as well as to have studied all these things. So I could then say, go, and lo and behold, she gets the result. That's the heart of it.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good place to leave it, if you're happy at an hour and a bit. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't touched on? Or
No,
you've got so much in there, but actually
yeah,
just something down into an hour is
I could keep you forever. There's things that I've mentioned online, and there's things that I've mentioned with other people now about my theories about masking. When people say masking, and I disagree adamantly and vehemently with that term, and I think it's actually the most unhelpful way of describing what people do that we can use. But if anyone wants to know why, I've put loads of information online about that, and that's fine. The same goes for whenever anyone says it's superheroes or we've got superpowers. It's the biggest nonsense I've ever heard in my life, and I've explained why. But the reason I say those things, I will just say this by way of rounding it out, is everything we've discussed because I've experienced it, because I've been around for long enough, nearly 15 years as somebody invested in this, to have understood that those terms are what people say when they don't know, when they don't have the depth of knowledge, and when they don't know a better, more productive way of describing what's going on. I'm a communicator. That's what I do. That's what I'm able to do. So if anyone wants to have that communicated in a different way, find me on LinkedIn, look me up, and I'm more than happy to discuss that. But yeah, I think otherwise we'll be here for days, because you and I both got ADHD, and you know how that tends to go.
Well, I've got D&D in 2 hours, so we can't stay forever.
Oh, there you go. Then you've got a commitment. And
I've got to make dinner in the middle of that as well. But
yeah, you and I both. Yeah, I've got to do that, and the sun's out, and I want to go and play golf as well. I've got the brains. Oh well, priorities. But no, I really enjoyed it, and I will just say this: you're doing a wonderful thing. I know why you're doing it. We've discussed it. I think you're doing a great thing, and I think you're doing the right thing, which is getting as many voices with as many opinions as you can, so that other people can hear them and take what they will from them. So yeah, I applaud you for that. You're top man.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Matt.
It's my absolute pleasure.